You're standing in a circle of about 30 people. No president, no police, no court, no written law of any kind. And yet somehow, when two men argue over who gets the last piece of meat, it gets resolved. When the group needs to decide whether to move camp before winter, everyone agrees on an answer. There's no vote counted on paper, no badge, no jail cell waiting for anyone who steps out of line. So who's actually in charge here? The answer is stranger and honestly smarter than almost anything we've built since. For 99% of human history, there was no government. No kings, no chiefs with armies, no laws written down anywhere. And yet humans lived in organized groups, made collective decisions, resolved violent disputes, and passed down leadership for hundreds of thousands of years. So how do you run a society with zero formal authority? It turns out you don't need one. You just need something far older than government: reputation. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Hadza in Tanzania, the hoansi in the Kalahari, and the Mbuti in Central Africa, have found something remarkably consistent. These groups are almost entirely egalitarian. No permanent chiefs, no inherited thrones, no one person holding power over the rest of the group by force. And this pattern shows up across completely unrelated cultures on different continents with no contact with each other. Which tells us something important. This wasn't a random cultural quirk. This was likely how humans organized for most of our existence. So if there's no official leader, how do decisions actually get made? Through something researchers call the reverse dominance hierarchy. In most primate groups, chimpanzees for example, the strongest, most aggressive male dominates the group through force and intimidation. Early humans had the same biological instincts. The drive for status, for control, for power was still there. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Instead of letting the strongest person dominate everyone else, the entire group would actively gang up to stop anyone from gaining too much power. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm, who spent decades studying this, called it reverse dominance. The many controlling the one instead of the one controlling the many. If someone in the group became too bossy, too aggressive, too greedy with food or resources, the rest of the group had tools to shut it down. And these tools were brutal in their simplicity. First, gossip. Talking behind someone's back about their bad behavior spread fast and did real damage to their reputation. Second, public ridicule. Mocking someone in front of the entire group was often enough to humiliate them into changing their behavior. Third, shunning. The group would simply stop cooperating with that person. No one would share food with them, hunt with them, or include them in group decisions. In a world where survival depended entirely on the group, being shunned was almost a death sentence. And if none of that worked, groups had one final option: exile, or in extreme cases, execution. Anthropological records show that in some hunter-gatherer societies, a person who repeatedly bullied, stole, or endangered the group could be killed. Often by consensus, sometimes carried out by the person's own family members to avoid a blood feud. This is why leadership in these societies looked completely different from what we'd expect. The people who did emerge as informal leaders weren't the strongest or most aggressive. They were the best hunters, the most skilled tool makers, the best storytellers, the most generous with food, the calmest during conflict. Leadership wasn't seized. It was earned through demonstrated competence and generosity, and it could be lost just as fast if that person started acting like they were better than everyone else. When conflicts did happen, and they did happen constantly over mates, resources, perceived insults, they weren't settled by a judge or a rulebook. They were settled through group mediation. Elders or respected members of the group would talk both sides through the issue, often publicly, in front of the whole camp. The goal wasn't punishment. The goal was restoring balance to the group, because a group that stayed fractured was a group that could die. Some anthropologists have documented something called the sulking chair, found in unrelated cultures worlds apart. When emotions ran too high to resolve immediately, the person in conflict would sit apart from the group until they calmed down enough to talk. No violence, no formal trial, just space, cooling off, and the entire group's shared interest in getting back to peace. Bigger decisions like when to move camp, When to go to war with a neighboring group, or how to divide a large kill were usually made through consensus. Everyone had a voice. Discussions could go on for hours around the fire until the entire group reached general agreement. This wasn't fast. It wasn't always fair to every individual, but it worked because everyone had skin in the game, and no one had the power to force a decision the rest of the group hated. This system had limits. It worked well for small mobile groups of maybe 25 to 50 people, where everyone knew everyone, and reputation could travel through the entire group in a single day. But once agriculture arrived, roughly 10,000 years ago, populations exploded. Groups grew from dozens of people to hundreds, then thousands, and the system broke. You can't gossip someone's reputation across a population of 10,000 strangers. You can't shun someone effectively when there are 100 other people willing to trade with them anyway. The tools that had kept power in check for hundreds of thousands of years stopped working at scale, and that gap is exactly where formal leadership stepped in. Chiefs, kings, priests, people who could claim authority not through earned reputation within a tiny, tightly bonded group, but through force, inheritance, or claimed divine right, backed by soldiers instead of gossip. Here's the uncomfortable part. The instinct for reverse dominance, for tearing down people who try to seize too much power, never left us. It's still in your brain right now. It's why we still gossip about bosses who abuse their authority. It's why public shaming still works as a social tool. It's why humans have an almost universal gut-level hatred of tyrants. That instinct is 300,000 years old, built for groups of 30 people sitting around a fire. And we're still running it in a world of 8 billion. For most of human history, leadership wasn't something you were born into or seized through force. It was something you earned, moment by moment, through what you did for the group, and something the entire group could take away the second you forgot that power was never really yours to keep.